Ohio State shakes off Nebraska and gears up for a trip to Happy Valley. Can they throw one in the L column for Penn State? We'll talk about that coming up here in just a bit. With the murdered out unis, A&M pulls out a homer over the Bayou Bengals of LSU. Are the Aggies earning your respect yet? Plus, we'll talk about the most surprising good and, most surprising bad teams of 2024 this season so far. And guys, listen, you can't both pick Oklahoma for the bad, okay? We'll talk about this all coming up. Get ready. The breakdown starts now. Welcome back to the Midweek College Football Breakdown. My name is the Ant-Man, joined to my left by my best friend for years, Brandon Stevens. Just to his left, well, he's got the best of both of us. He's got B's brains and my voice, Coach Dalton Nolan. Welcome, guys. Good to see you again. If I had to use one word to describe Saturdays this fall so far, listen, this is a day that I always look forward to in the fall. I get up early. I grab my coffee early. I do my devotional early. I put game day on when it starts. I cook the family breakfast. They wake up to sizzling bacon, and I look forward to my Sooners kicking off the day. Typically, the word that I would use is ecstatic. However, more recently, it's become melancholy. Now, the emotions that come in between those two words are plentiful, but at this point, I'm finding myself looking for other things to do after the games. And if anything, it's kind of broadened my appeal for other college football teams, made me look at other programs a little bit closer, like Ohio State and Penn State. Let's get started. They got surprisingly an early game this week, 11 a.m. kickoff on Fox. This one for sure feels like it should have been a primetime game. Ohio State losing going into the final 10 minutes of the game last week. Score with 6 minutes on the clock to hold off Nebraska, taking the Huskers to 5-3 this season. Now the Buckeyes head to Happy Valley early to face an undefeated Penn State. Guys, what must Ohio State learn from last week's game to be able to provide the Nittany Lions with their first L this weekend? Dalton, I'll start with you, bud.
Yeah, you mentioned it feels like this should be a primetime game. And one of the things I hate about Fox is the primetime game of the week is always 11 a.m. for them because that's where Big Noon goes.
That's
so
right.
It's super frustrating because this game, man, I wanted to see a wide out in Happy Valley at 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. Like there's just that's one of the coolest scenes in college football to watch. But I think that Ohio State might have overlooked Nebraska just a little bit. When you put these two teams square and square, I think Will Howard's playing better ball than Drew Aller. Both have only thrown 4 interceptions, but Howard's got 17 touchdowns to Aller's 12. You look at the rushing game, Judkins, he's got more touchdowns than Allen does. And you look at their best receivers, Smith, he's got 8 touchdowns and only 35 receptions, 623 yards to 47 receptions, 559 yards. I mean, I think that Ohio State is a better football team. And we saw them play in a grudge match against Oregon. I mean, this team is definitely playoff worthy. And the thing is I'm starting to switch my gear from a few weeks ago. Maybe Penn State is too. But all in all, I think that Ohio State overlooked Nebraska a little bit. And I think that they were ready for this game in Happy Valley. I think Ohio State's the better team. I think they have more weapons. And I think they'll ultimately come out on top.
We'll find out early this week. B, in your lock of the week last week, you had the Bayou Bengals taking home the dub against the blacked out A&M Aggies. 108,000 plus did their part, as did their backup QB, Marcel Reed, to give you and LSU a loss in that game. You've mentioned before that to have 2 QBs means to have no QBs. However, Texas A&M is kind of using it to their advantage. Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't know that. I mean, their quarterback situation is very interesting to me. I mean, Marcel Reed comes into the game early in the third quarter last week. Connor Wegman just was not doing it. He was 8 for 18 for 84 yards. He just wasn't doing it. Marcel Reed comes in, only throws 2 passes for 70 yards, no touchdowns. But his legs, he ran for 3 touchdowns. On his first play in the game, they had just intercepted Nussmeier for LSU, and his first play in the game, he takes off for a touchdown. So follow that up with a couple more interceptions by Nussmeier, And they just use his legs. I mean, he ran the ball 9 times in the second half for 62 yards, 3 touchdowns, didn't throw a touchdown, didn't throw an interception, didn't fumble. I mean, held onto the ball, controlled the offense. I made that pick going off of Connor Wegman playing the game, not realizing how bad he was going to be in the first half. I didn't think he was a very good quarterback to begin with, but Grant Nussmeier really handed that game to them in the second half, gave them 21 points in the second half off of 3 horrible passes, which is something he hadn't done to this point in the season yet. He has not had that game where he just blew up. I think they were in the right place at the right time. I think the quarterback situation was in the right place at the right time. LSU had obviously not scouted and prepared for Reed to come into the game. And so I think A&M caught him off guard. Yeah. Do we give A&M credit? Of course you give A&M credit. I mean, first off, that environment there is insane. That environment there is rocking. But wearing those blacked out uniforms, I loved those uniforms. And seeing the crowd get pumped. I mean, in the first half, the crowd was kind of quiet. LSU was up 17-7 at halftime. And that just made Elko decide to make the change going in the third quarter. They did it, and it worked out for their favor. I'm interested to see what happens with A&M once they have to kind of play somebody that's preparing for him. If they can prepare for him, knowing that he's not great at throwing the ball. He did make the one long, I don't remember, I think it was 57-yard pass. That was a great pass on the money to a running wide receiver in stride. But I think once teams are able to prepare for that, then they're going to be able to slow it down some. I think Texas A&M's defense is a decent defense. I mean, they gave up 405 yards through the air. They only gave up 35 yards on the ground. Their rushing defense is phenomenal, but they do give up those points through the air. And I think teams are going to be able to prepare for them if Reed is going to be the quarterback going forward, because they're not going to be a balanced offense. So it's going to be tough.
Well, and I've got a great friend that's a huge Texas A&M fan. So we've been talking a little bit this season, and since I haven't really known a lot about the Aggies traditionally, but I've had some extra time, as I mentioned earlier, after the end of Oklahoma games, I just get my mind off of those. And we've been talking about that. And I thought after this game, well, okay, now you switch back to Reed and got the win. And it's kind of like, I think the first week we saw this was against Missouri. Missouri planned for Reed to be in that game, and Wegman came in and won that game. And it's
right.
They're always, it seems like they have their opponent always preparing for the wrong quarterback. If they can keep that up, they're going to probably do what they have been doing. Now, Dalton, the Aggies travel to South Carolina this weekend. Given the strengths and weaknesses of each of the QBs, who do you see starting this game against the Cox?
I assume it's going to be Wegman. But again, I don't know. I think that Elko, he's earning my respect. I was not sure about the hire. Yeah, he was pretty dang good at Duke, but they fell off after his quarterback Riley Leonard got hurt, who's now the starter at Notre Dame. So my guess is they're going to go with Wegman, but at the end of the day, I have no idea what he's going to go with. I think that this has the potential to be a close game, even though you're looking at the Aggies, who are number 1 in the SEC right now, just because you can't overlook Lenore Sellers. He's made some plays. They've obviously got some good SEC wins. I think they're a very mediocre team, middle of the pack, but definitely a team that can sneak up on you. So I'm gonna say they're gonna start Wegman, but I wouldn't be surprised if they go with Reed. The thing is, if they're gonna go with Reed, they gotta let him throw the ball a little bit more than 2 times.
Yeah, and Mike Elko's not saying anything. He was asked that in his press conference earlier this week, and he's like, "We're gonna let the week play out and see what happens."
His press conferences right now are gold. His there's not a politician running this team anymore. I was just like, oh, okay, I like that.
But you mentioned you like their uniform picks for this one. Evidently, their social media has been kind of their unveiling every week of what kind of teasing of what they're going to do, and they've done a great job with it. And they're not long productions. I know we get as Sooner fans, we get a scene setter every week that they do an exceptional job on. These are short little clips though, and the one they did for the blacked out uniforms might be one of the sickest I've seen. So if you feel like going back on A&M's football, specifically Instagram, they've done a great job with those reveals on. And they've traditionally A&M hasn't been one that's changed up their uniforms. This year they have, and it's kind of been fun to watch some of those. Listen, this 2024 season given us the first signs of the trickle down effect of NIL in college football. Yes. We've had transfers in the past, but nothing like what we saw really this year. Combine that with retiring coaches and this, that, and the other, and you have, good teams going bad and notoriously bad teams going good. We're going to end on a good note, before we get into the talk about Oklahoma. So let's start with the bad. The surprisingly bad this year. B, who do you want to talk about as a surprisingly bad team this year?
My surprisingly bad team is going to stay in this state, but not be the team that y'all are talking about or that you're thinking about. My surprisingly bad team is going to be the Oklahoma State Cowboys. I mean, they were, there's this funny.
You cut out for a second.
Oh, my surprisingly bad team is going to be the Oklahoma State Cowboys. That they were handed this conference on a silver platter with Oklahoma and Texas leaving. Although none of us thought at the beginning of the year they were going to win it because they always find a way to screw it up. But they have not won a game in the Big 12 this year.
Oh, you look back, insane.
Yeah, they're 3-5. They have not won a game in the Big 12. You look back on some of the stats from last year, and none of them are great when it comes to team stats, but they were averaging 30 points a game. They were only giving up 28 points a game. They ended the season last year 10-4 and they beat Oklahoma last year. The last time, Oklahoma State's going to play, whatever. So great season for Oklahoma State, 10-4. And you go down and look at some of their stats. Alan Bowman, quarterback last year, completed over 60% of his passes for almost 3,500 yards, 15 touchdowns, but 14 interceptions. Lots of yards, decent amount of touchdowns, but a lot of picks. The big one to me is you got to go to their rushing game. Ollie Gordon last year averaged 6.1 yards a carry and rushed for over 1,700 yards, 21 touchdowns, caught one touchdown. I mean, you flip that to their stats for this year, and they're averaging, crazily, just a little bit more points at 30.5. They're giving up almost the exact same amount of points at 29.9. But scroll down to their offensive production. I mean, Bowman, through 8 games, is still 1,500 yards behind his total passing last year. He has thrown a better touchdown to interception ratio. He's got 14 touchdowns, only 10 interceptions. But scroll down to Ollie Gordon, who coming into this season, I think there are people all over this country that would have named him as the leading candidate to win the Heisman coming into this season.
Right.
Like I've said, the Heisman is a quarterback award, but if he'd have done what he did last year, improved on that a little bit this year, he'd have been gold. He's rushed for 568 yards through 8 games. Only 8 touchdowns. It's unbelievable. And to me, a lot of it has to do with Mike Gundy. I think mentally he's done. I think in his heart he still wants to be there. I think mentally he's done, but he may not be left that choice at the end of the season. And I know I've said it plenty of times to people. I feel like he's there until he decides he wants to leave.
Sure. Because
of his relationship with all the donors, his relationship. I don't feel like it matters. Yeah. I don't feel like it matters after this season. If I'm an Oklahoma State fan, I'm wanting his job on the line. I'm wanting him out of there. But Oklahoma State is one of my most disappointing teams this year.
Typically not so great, but it's 2024. So this season it's different for who, Dalton? Who's the good that you got to share with us?
Yeah, there were three teams that really came to mind for me, but number one standout that is just surprising me, and I think all of college football right now, is the Indiana Hoosiers. Curt Cignetti.
Absolutely.
Man, he is doing an incredible job with Indiana. They're averaging 46.5 points per game. Their Rourke is on pace to throw for over 2,000 yards. We'll see how far he gets after that. Ellison's on his way to a 1,000-yard rushing season. And when you look at their schedule, there really is only one loss on this schedule, and that's at the Shoe at Ohio State. And I'm not certain that that's even a guaranteed win. I think that they're a tougher team. The thing about this schedule for Indiana is it played into their favor. They haven't had a very difficult schedule. Didn't have to play Oregon this year. Don't have Penn State on the schedule. So, they finish up at what point they thought Michigan was going to be a tough game. Michigan's not the same team anymore, but, it fell into their hands, and then they took care of business. And their offense is just absolutely rolling right now. I don't think anybody expected this, regardless of how good Cignetti was at James Madison as a 52-9 record there, was 11-1 in his final year. He's got transfers from James Madison. He's doing this without the top NIL guys. He's doing this and he's building a culture in year one. I listened to his videos. I've listened to some of his press conferences, and he's one of those that implements what he says. Mm-hmm. So when he tells you that he's doing something with his program, he's going to go make it happen. And his guys are buying into that. November 23rd is a game that they probably have marked on their calendar, but from weeks past, I'm telling you, they're not looking ahead to that game right now. Right now, they're looking at Michigan State. They're going to focus on getting that win. They're going to focus on beating Michigan. And from there, we'll see what happens at the Shoe. I think that's going to be a fun one. That's got a chance to be college game day. Indiana, they're the good for the most surprising team this season for me.
First time on a weekend that College Game Day went to Indiana this past weekend, and what a cool moment for Lee Corso.
Yeah,
and that as well. I said before, I was telling him, I was like, I think this is going to be a very special day for Lee Corso coming up on Saturday, and explain to her why, and him being the coach there, and the first one to ever take him to a bowl game, all that kind of stuff, and have that opportunity to be able to honor the coach on game day. Really cool for him too. So.
What Cignetti's doing is, the last time they started 7-0 was 1967. My dad was 3 years old the last time Indiana.
Damn, and he's old.
Right. So what he's doing in this program, it's the first time since 2021 that Indiana's even been in the AP. Incredible season so far for Indiana, and it's not done yet.
If you don't follow us on any of our socials, Instagram, X, TikTok, any of that, find us on there and follow along at Midweek Breakdown, and let us know who's been the surprising good or the surprising bad for you in this football season, because it has been squirrely, to say the least. Listen, if you've been with us for even one podcast so far this year, you know our love for Oklahoma football, and it has not gone away. We complain because we care, but it's hard to even address the concerns anymore when your team seems to not be able to put two halves together on both sides of the ball. And even worse, a coach that so many of us love and we're wishing and hoping and praying will lead us back to the promised land can't seem to even lead us to 2 W's in the SEC. At least hasn't yet. Today, we get this tweet. This one comes from Parker Thune. Venables, quoting him, "We've got good NIL, but at the end of the day, I want guys that want to be here because they want to put on crimson and cream." Listen, speak up when I start telling lies, guys, but no one, not even Brent Venables, if he's honest, is loyal or more loyal to crimson and cream than he is to green. 2024 is different. Pandora's box has been opened. It has 3 letters on it. It's NIL. Your school colors don't attract elite as much as the money does. So tell me when I'm telling lies. B, what's your thought on this, dude?
I appreciate the sentiment. I really do. But he's living in the old days.
Yep.
You're not getting that now. And if he's not willing to move forward in that and be like, look, we're gonna field the best team we can this year. Period. I don't care if it's through the portal. I don't care if it's out of high school. We're gonna field the best possible team we can this year. I feel like and we've talked about this, I feel like he's a loyalty runs deep kind of guy.
Yeah.
And he wants that loyalty and he gives that loyalty. But I think it's to a fault. If you're not willing to go out and get the best players available at a position or a spot you need to be able to move forward with your team, then you're going to be left behind in this day and age. This is not the old days where people loved Bud Wilkinson and Barry Switzer and when they were little kids and saw Barry's charisma and decided they wanted to play at OU whenever they came to OU or whenever it came time to pick a college. That's not the way it happens anymore. Are there going to be some of those? Of course. Are there going to be some of those kids that are like, you don't even have to pay me, I'll come to OU and play? Of course there are. But I don't think it's going to be the big name kids that are doing that anymore, because the big name kids in this day and age, this is what they're going to know. They're going to know that players going into college get paid and get big contracts, and they're not going to understand the tradition and the stuff like that, nor are they going to care as long as their bank accounts get fat. He's got to catch up to that and quit being like his old head coach Dabo at Clemson that just refuses to use the portal. And he's got to catch up. That really rubbed me the wrong way. If he's not willing to go get the best players, then he needs to go.
And I got another tweet here for you. Mason Young, Brent Venables, quoting him again. If the storms are a reason why guys want to leave, I'm all for it. I'll help them pack their bags. Listen, different rules for different positions, I think. And hard and fast rule for a head coach is win. If that doesn't happen in an undisclosed amount of time, you get a buyout suitcase. And that suitcase is full of cash, but next to it is the rest of your luggage. Dalton, how much time does BV have left?
He's for sure got next year.
Okay.
For sure.
All year?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think Joe C is going to make a move. I think that, BV even said it today. They said that this was, I don't know if he actually surpassed it, but he was on pace to have the longest press conference today in OU football coach history. I don't know if he ended up surpassing it or not, but I was following Parker throughout the day because he had the quotes coming. Like he had a 9-minute statement on Kevin Johns, and then he had a long statement about his relationship with Joe C and how they meet weekly and how he's got a lot of wisdom and he's seen the good and the bad of college football. And I think that he's for sure here for the rest of this season and next season. And then if he shows a little improvement and a little success and makes some strides in the SEC, I think they'll keep him. I don't see them moving on from Brent Venables. And I'm just kind of at the point where my expectations are low. I don't have any expectations for Oklahoma football under Brent Venables right now. I hope that things change. I hope that things turn for the better. But I said this earlier to you guys. I really thought that we were hiring this intense, best defensive mind in the country, and we got Dabo 2.0, who's worse at game management and clock management and adjustments in the game. And Uncle B and I were talking about that even today. How long are we going to sit through a game and watch our secondary consistently get burned after play after play, not knowing where they're supposed to be or what spots they're supposed to be in, getting set in time. And then we hear about true freshman, man, he's working hard in practice. He's doing great. He wants to be on the field. He's given us a great look. And we're, Jacoby Johnson's so athletic. We can use him in multiple spots. We'll move him around to different places and switch him to the offense. Like, okay, at some point when the guys aren't getting the job done on the field, are we going to make an adjustment? I mean, shoot, the season's over. Are you going to try something on the defensive side? I mean, I still feel like even in that second half when the offense wasn't clicking against Ole Miss, Oklahoma, if they could have found a way to get some stops, get some pressure on Jackson Dart, cover some dudes down the field, know where their assignments were supposed to be, it was still a game we could have won. I mean, so it's frustrating, and I think Brent's here, for at least another year after this. And like I said, hopefully changes are made, but I think that until we buy into NIL 100%, Oklahoma football is going to continue to slide.
Maine this weekend, early game. Judging by what I've seen so far, it looks like maybe the last early game, and the rest of them look like they're night games or late afternoon games. So we'll see what happens against an FCS team this weekend. Yeah. I was looking for them as I was setting up some social media and looking for their handle, their football handle. And it was very hard to find, and I finally found it, and I thought it was a high school for a second. That's what the stadium looked like. I'm not disparaging their school whatsoever. Just that wasn't what I was expecting. So at least hopefully we show up in both quarters this week. That's what I'm hoping for. I'm not holding my breath. I mean, we'll wait till Saturday.
It's going to be interesting. We'll see, obviously, more true freshmen on the offensive line. We don't have a choice there without Jake Taylor, without Jacob Sexton. But again, we learned that last week, if the scheme is right, you can have some success running the football regardless of who's on the line. So, yeah,
have fun.
I'm not really sure.
Play with it a little bit this weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to have better athletes than they do. Regardless, we have to have better athletes than they do. They can't match up with our athletes. They probably have some, like I told you guys in a little pre-pod meeting. They have to have some. I'm sure they got some guys that maybe couldn't qualify, school-wise at a D1 school or something. I mean, they have a win over a D1 team this year in Villanova. 2 weeks ago, they beat them 35-0. Now, Villanova's terrible, but we can't just show up to this game and hope to win. We're going to have to game plan, a good game plan, like we did in the first half last week. Man, those first two possessions last week, they were scripted. I get it, but those first two, let's script the whole game.
Bingo.
Script the whole game if that's what it takes. I mean, I get it. 3rd and 8, and you're in your script. You're supposed to be running a, delayed draw up the middle. Change that one. Okay, I get it. But we're going to have to show up. We can't just go through the motions. We may beat them by 50. I don't know. But let me just warn the fans. If we beat them by 50, that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
We're still a bad football team right now. So I don't want to see any of these, we're back posts, or we're not Texas. We're not Texas when they're in a bad season and they beat Baylor by 7 at home and they're back all of a sudden. We're not that. I don't want to see any of this we're back stuff. We got a lot of work to do. And as far as BV goes, I mean, if we have another offensive year like this next year, then he'll be gone at the end of next year. But this offensive coordinator hire and the way the offense produces next year is how his job's going to go.
I want him to be the guy so bad. When
I do
they made
too.
that announcement, and still keeping my fingers crossed on that. Let's jump into some picks for this week. Now, you both got your single games correct from last week, but you both missed on your master lock. So the score, the difference stays the same. B, you're still up 2 points, and you go first this week for your picks. What do you got, bud?
My first pick is going to Houston, Texas, on a team that's just rolling now. K-State's coming into town. Houston got a win last week over what we thought was going to be a really good Utah team in the preseason. They're just not. They're a terrible football team. They're terrible. You got Avery Johnson coming in. Just he's been lighting it up. He's thrown for 1,654 yards. Has thrown 16 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He's also ran for 4 touchdowns. You got DJ Giddens, their running back, will hit 1,000 yards this week. He's got 945 yards. and 4 touchdowns. I mean, they're just way better football team than Houston is. Coach has them playing right. Coach has them playing good. They come off a big in-state rivalry game last week at home against KU, which Dalton was at that game. And I can't imagine the atmosphere was anything less than electric with what was going on in that game. But I'm gonna take K-State minus the 13.5 at Houston this week.
Dalton?
I don't mind that pick. Stayed away from it just because I don't trust K-State, especially after watching the game this week. They gave that game up to the Jayhawks, which was pretty wild. And I know that's a rivalry and anything can happen in a rivalry game, but at home, I just didn't expect them to come get outplayed and then find a way to win still. But Houston's not a good football team either, so not a bad pick. I am going out to Williams-Brice Stadium. We've talked about this team quite a bit. They've dominated Kentucky early. They've obviously got the road win in Norman. Lenore Sellers, they almost beat LSU. They have some playmakers and ability to be a good team, but I think that right now Elko has that entire team of those Aggies believing that program is playoff contention program. I mean, they are number 1 in the SEC right now. We talked about it earlier, have no idea who they're going to send out to start the game. And, at this point, you might end up even seeing both of these quarterbacks. I was a little surprised when I saw the spread only at 2.5 for Texas A&M, making it a little easy for me because I really believe they win this game, whether it's good, whether it's ugly. So give me Texas A&M minus 2.5 on the road to South Carolina.
All right, B, pick 2. What do you got, bud?
Pick 2 for me is going to Spartan Stadium in East Lansing, Michigan. Dalton talked about Indiana earlier as his biggest surprise team this year. I mean, I can't say enough about him. Curtis Rourke, their quarterback, is completing almost 75% of his passes. He's thrown for 15 touchdowns, only 3 picks, over 1,900 yards. He'll go over 2,000 yards this week in this game. Playing against a Michigan State team that's just not very good. They're 4-4. They're 10th right now in the Big Ten. You got Aiden Childs at quarterback for them, who has thrown 2 more interceptions than he has touchdowns. He's got 7 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, thrown for 1,600 yards, but he's only completing 61% of his passes. I just think Indiana's going to be too much. As long as they're not looking forward, then I think Indiana's going to be fine. Indiana's going to roll in this game. They're a 7.5-point favorite. I'm going to take them minus the 7.5 at Michigan State.
Pick 2 for you, Dalton.
Yeah, I stayed away from that game because I had a feeling you might pick it, and I didn't want to pick the same games. I'm going to stay in the SEC. I'm going to rock with the Ole Miss Rebels here this week as they gear up to play Arkansas. I just every single week I can, it wouldn't surprise me if Ole Miss was like, we're going to go put up 70 this week. Their offense is just that powerful. I mean, yeah, again, they may only score 25 to 30 points in a game, but at any given time, any given quarter, they can go for 3 or 4 touchdowns. Jackson Dart's just too good. He's already almost at 2,700 yards on the year. He's going to be over 3,000 on the year, easy. They're averaging 40 points per game. Arkansas has been such an up and down team this year. So how many upsets can you actually get in the SEC before you are finally contending in the SEC? And Arkansas is just not there yet. So give me the Rebels and Jackson Dart to take care of business and cover the 7 points against Arkansas.
Double your points, the master lock. B, who you picking on this one?
I'm staying in the Big Ten. Dalton stayed in the SEC. I'm staying in the Big Ten. You got number 1 Oregon Ducks going to the Big House at Michigan, favored by 14.5. I think they're too good. I feel like they're getting better every week. You got Dylan Gabriel. You got Jordan. Oh gosh, sorry. You got Jordan James. Their running back has rushed for over 800 yards, 6 touchdowns. I mean, Oregon's just good. And I think Michigan is not as bad as they looked like they were early on in the season. But I just don't think Michigan has the firepower to keep up with Oregon. And like I said, Oregon's getting better every week. Only favored by 14.5 to me seems kind of like a trap spread. I don't think there's any trap in here. I think Oregon's going to roll in this game, probably by 3-4 touchdowns. I just don't see Michigan, Davis Warren being able to keep up with them. They've had some quarterback things kind of going like this with Alex Orji, Jack Tuttle, Davis Warren. Davis Warren's finally the guy. Sharon Moore came out this week and said Davis Warren has won this job. He's thrown for almost 600 yards on the season, but he's doubled his interceptions to touchdowns. He's got 6 interceptions and 3 touchdowns. So they're just not going to have the firepower to keep up with Oregon. I don't care how good their defense is. I think if Oregon only gets held to 28, 30 points, they're still covering the spread. But I expect them to score a lot more than that. So give me, for my master lock, Oregon minus 14.5 at Michigan.
Who are you locking down?
Man, I'm gonna go to the Big Ten as well, and I'm gonna play for double points here. I'm gonna go with an underdog who's in the top 25. Illinois and Minnesota this week. Minnesota is currently a 3-point favor over Illinois. And honestly, this one could kind of go either way because even though Illinois is ranked, they're still at about that same tier as Minnesota, in my opinion, both averaging 27 points per game. Luke Altmaier is okay. He's an average quarterback. He's pretty good at managing the game, but they still don't really have that signature win. I think they would have liked to consider their win over Michigan a signature win, but then Minnesota could do the same thing and say that our win over USC is a signature win. So I think it's a pretty evenly matched game, but being ranked, being 6-2, and still hoping that somebody else can lose and fighting for that Big Ten spot, I think that they still believe that there is a shot at them to slide into the playoff if they can win out. And so there's a lot to play for in that Illinois program. And so I'm going to rock with them to actually cover as the underdog and go ahead and win outright to give me double points this week and finally catch back up and put me where I belong on top.
You think this will do it?
Yeah, this is the week I'm going to do it.
All right. Good luck on that.
Yeah,
no. Hey, listen, thank you guys for being with us this week, whether you're listening or you're watching. Listen, if you're watching, especially if you're on YouTube, make sure you hit like and subscribe so you never miss one of our episodes. It's free for you, and it helps us tremendously. So we'd love it if you did that. If you really love this podcast, share it with a friend. Help a lot too. So we appreciate you being here. If you're listening right now, like this episode and rate it. That would help us out there as well. We're on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, on TikTok. Follow us there at Midweek Breakdown. We appreciate you guys.
Even if you don't like it, go ahead and share it.
Yeah, do that. Yeah, please.
Please. Pretty please. Guys, it's been fun. You know what they say.
Weekend is good,
but the midweek is always better.
And boom goes the dynamite.